Today we're going to be learning the process to make acorn soup, an important staple in a lot of tribal diet traditionally since time immemorial. What I was taught to me by a teacher. She's still with us, she's an elder. She taught me that it was important to pass on whatever information or whatever ways that I was taught, and that's what I'm here today. Throughout this video, you're going to be hearing from Marnie Atkins sharing with us traditional tools and baskets used in Wiyot acorn processes. The acorns that we gather are tan oak acorns, and there's many different kind of oak trees, but there are oak groves that were taken care of and are still taken care of for thousands and thousands of years. Part of indigenous science. It's a legacy that's passed down and is being revitalized today. And we're glad that you're here to participate in the revitalization of this. Today, we are calling it traditional ecological knowledge, but it's really science too, and so that's something I wanted to be really clear about. So the tan oak acorns have a prickly cap. The acorns that you see here don't have the little caps, but the way that the tan oak acorn tree, the oak tree, can be identified is by the leaves that they're scalloped, but they have points. They don't have the lobes. And also, the acorns have prickly caps. We go gather when the first big wind blows. It's generally in the fall. Sometimes it'll be in October, sometimes it'll be in November, but it's part of looking at the seasons and how they change. So the first big wind, the rotten ones come down, right? And we can look at them. You check your grove for the places that you gather. You visit them. We take care of them. We visit and look. The second big wind is when it's really time to get going and to get going gathering. When we go out and we gather, we look for acorn that will not have holes in them. And also, we like to do it as a family. It's something that all ages can do, kids can do. And when I go out, when I've taken kids before, there's a song that I will do, and I can do it in the language that I'm part of, but I'll do it in English right now. We can sing with the kids if they're little kids. We're gonna get some acorns, we're gonna get some acorns, lots and lots of acorns, we're gonna get some acorns. And you have one time a year to get them for the whole year. And when we're out gathering, sometimes they'll be under leaves. And again, it's the tan oak tree. What I was taught is that we look for the acorns with the white butts. This is an older acorn that's been cured, but this is what we're looking for, to be very white when we gather. And so when we gather, we'll see acorns that have this, and that's okay. But a lot of times we'll see acorns that have this. Do you see the hole? Yeah. Do you see it? Let's find another one. That's the one you don't want because they have worms in them. Here we go. Here's another one. You don't want that. There's worms in them. One way that I was taught that tan oak groves were managed and are managed to a lesser extent today is by using cultural fire. Cultural fire are controlled burns, low intensity, that take away the duff on the ground around the oak trees. That reduces the occurrence of parasites, and it also provides nutrients to the soil. Cultural burns help the water in the ground as well that supports the oak groves. And that's another tradition that's being revitalized today. That was made illegal at one time, but people kept doing it, and that legacy of indigenous science still continues today. When we get our acorn, we have to store them in a basket. This basket has open sides, it's wicker. What I've used before is like a wicker laundry basket by a wood stove. If you don't have a wood stove, you find a really warm place in your house and you keep stirring it. That way your acorns are cured. You know, one thing I think is important to mention is that I was taught that before we gather, we pray, and when we get to the place where we gather, we can make an offering. Sometimes people offer like tobacco, some people offer a prayer, some people offer a song. It can be just in yourself, you know, but that prayer is part of that science. It's that reciprocal relationship we have with the acorn and the tan oak trees. They're not just plants. I was told they're plant people, they're tree people, and we have a relationship with them. And that makes our indigenous science different than Western science. And remember, indigenous science, Wiyot science, has been in our area, in Wiyot ancestral land, since time immemorial. Western science just came and is still learning about this area and from the native people. And some people have songs when they gather acorns, and that's up to you. And don't be afraid to pray out loud. Don't be afraid to sing. That's what I was taught. Well, when your acorns are curing in the basket by their wood stove, or if in a warm place in your house, keep stirring them. And also, I was taught to put pepperwood leaves in them to help keep the bugs out. And this is a pepperwood leaf. It's also medicine. You'll learn more about that, I'm sure. So this is always what's kept in them. After a year, you can start to process your acorns. My teacher had me just go out on the river bar and get some rocks to crack your acorns with. Again, the teachings around the rocks were that, again, these are like rock people. Don't kick rocks. She would tell my children to go out and listen to the rocks, see which one wants to come with you. And this is just the way what she said to us. So I found some rocks. You'll keep them, and you'll take one of your acorn, and you're going to crack it, right? Okay. So inside your acorn, all right, this came out. If you crack it too hard, you smash them, but you better pick up those little pieces because, of course, this food was really important, and is it used in all kind of important ceremonies, and for elders when they're sick, this food is super important. But I'm going to put this to the side. This is the paper. You don't want that. That gets thrown away. This is the inside of the shell. These can go in your fireplace or in your fire pit or just outside. If, like this one, the paper inside is sticking to it, the inner layer, you can scratch it off with your nail, but you don't want that in your acorn soup. This is what your acorns will look like after you've cracked them. Remember, we wait a year for them to cure, and then after that you're going to crack your acorns. And as you're looking, sometimes they'll break. You keep every little piece, and you'll see this one right here. This one has some dark on it. What I was taught was that you can keep some of these ones with the dark parts of them, because they make your acorn soup sweeter. And it's up to you how you want to do that. This black part is not the paper, it's actually the part of the acorn, and it's a little bit of fermentation maybe. And that brings up another point. There's another traditional food with acorns where people would put acorns in running creeks buried, and they would turn into an extra fermented soft acorn. And it was just another way of preparation. People make acorn bread, people make acorn soup, but the core ingredient that we're learning about in this video is making acorn flour and then making acorn soup. There are traditional ways of grinding your acorns, but there's also modern ways, and people do both. And one way that I've done it before is using a blender, and I've also used a coffee grinder or a spice grinder, and that's what I brought today. So we're gonna, and then you don't want to put your pepperwood leaves in when you're grinding. This will be a slower process, but this is one way to do it that's just quick and easy. We have our acorns, and I'm using a spice or a coffee bean grinder. I'm gonna lock the lid. And now that we've ground up our acorn into flour, the next step is leaching. Acorns are full of tannic acid, and so if you take a taste of this flour, it's going to taste bitter. The leaching process washes out the tannic acid out of the acorn flour. I'm going to show you the basket that I use for leaching. This is a basket that I use to leach my acorns. It's just a basket that I found in a thrift store. You can find any basket that has holes so that water can flow through. In traditional times, there would be on the sandbar a pile of sand with a depression in it lined with maple leaves. That's just what I was taught. And the acorn flour would be in the depression with the acorn leaves, and somebody would be pouring water continuously through the acorn flour until it was the proper flavor. So it takes a while sometimes. In this modern day, this is how I was taught. So if you've ever seen this before, this is what maybe your grandmother or you used to make jam. So this is called cheesecloth. And so the flour is really fine. So generally I like to use 2 cheesecloths to put this inside. I like to use 2 cheesecloths to put inside this basket to make sure none of the fine flour comes out. This is a great activity to do as a family. Kids can help grind, crack acorns, and of course gifting it is an important part of what I was taught, is we share everything that we get. And so right here, see how it's pretty thick, like water can flow through, it won't let the fine flour go through. So this will go directly into the basket. Now you see these right here? We put those right back in. So if we find any big chunks, and we just put it back in. And of course, when you're cooking, you're putting all your love and your good thoughts, because that's where it's taught. You make food with love. This is a great time to have kids or anybody just taste a little bit of the flour. And they'll say, "Ooh, it's bitter." And that's because it has all that tannic acid in it. And then after you leach, by pouring water from your faucet continuously through the acorn flour, sometimes 24 hours, some people do longer, you'll find out depending on the acorn, depending on your process, and then have them taste it, and it's a lot different. And so again, you're pulling out the bigger pieces, and then you do it again. The next step, if you're in your home kitchen, is to leach it. You know, I usually have like a pot that I make spaghetti noodles in, and then I set this right on top of it, and kind of like it sets on top, right? And so water will be going through. And this is something that if you're continuously running water through, you're not going to want to let it catch. You're going to have to dump it out. So you'll have to keep an eye on it. Sometimes people will turn it off overnight and then pick it up the next day. We're going to transition to the sink and show you how to leach using the basket, the cheesecloth, and here we go.
Here you'll see that we have the processed acorn powder and we have a bowl. This is the bowl that Kate was showing us, and the basket with the acorn powder in it. So we're going to set this into the sink, and we are going to make sure, that it's more crumbly than it is clumped so that we can start leaching. Try to start your faucet to the side so you don't splash into your face or hit it with the water and it gets all over the sink. You want to keep as much into the basket as possible. So here I'm just starting to get that water in there with the acorns to start the leaching process to, get all of that bitterness out. If you are to use this kind of a faucet, it's kind of nice because you can set it and aim it wherever you'd like. It's good to go ahead and just sort of run your fingers gently through all of the acorn to make sure that it's not clumped together and that the water can get into all the little bits and pieces and get the bitterness out while it's leaching through. And you'll see here too that I also have the water on a really slow run, but when I'm doing this at home for a longer period of time, it's slower. I put it on a slower drip, if you will, and I do it overnight. So we will let some of this water run out since this is just a demonstration here now. I constantly have to, if you put a bowl in there, you got to check that bowl or that pot or whatever you're using and make sure you dump it out so that the acorns don't sit into the bowl. It defeats the purpose. Also, I'm always sort of checking that cheesecloth to make sure that it doesn't fall into the acorns or start to slide down because I don't want to lose anything. So here I'm just going to dump out this water. So like I said earlier, it doesn't sit in itself and defeat the purpose of leaching. This is going to make a delicious powder eventually once you kind of dry it out and then you store it. Here I am fussing with that cheesecloth, right? But what we'll do at the end after we're done leaching it for as long as we want, it's also good to take a little bite, take a little piece, take some taste to see if it's at the level, if the bitterness has gotten out. Sometimes you might want it a little more bitter or a little less bitter. But let's say that it's done. So we gather up the cheesecloth and try not to spill it, and we just squeeze out that excess water so that when we lay it out, we can really get it drying. But this is what it looks like. It's going to be kind of clumpy, almost sort of like sand, if you will. And when you lay it out, you'll just go ahead and, again, break it up so that it dries properly. But this is what it looks like. It kind of looks like a meal. And, but it's like an acorn meal or an acorn, like oatmeal, but it's acorn meal or cornmeal, right? It's similar to cornmeal. And that's how you start to leach.
Now that we've leached our acorn flour, we've gotten rid of that bitter taste, that tannic acid, and now we're ready to cook our acorns. Now, if you're in your kitchen, you can put the wet acorn flour into a pot, add water about the same amount if you want it more watery, but start with a little bit of water and add slowly. And you'll depend if you want thicker acorns, if you want acorn water to more of a drink, or if you want, it's kind of like oatmeal where you keep stirring it, it'll get gelatinous. So remember, add your water slowly. And the traditional way of cooking is using cooking rocks. One of the most important tools is fire. And so you'd be having your cooking rocks in the fire, heating up. These are cooking rocks. They can be found on the river bar, on the beach. They're black, smooth, shiny, and no cracks. So these would be heating up in the fire. There would be a cooking basket. So the acorn flour would be put in the cooking basket. Water would be added, same as you would with a pot, but you would put your cooking rocks that are very hot right into the cooking basket, and you'd start stirring immediately, and again, adding more rocks as needed to cook it that way. If you look in old cooking baskets, sometimes you might see a dark spot where the hot rock settled just a little bit, and a lot of times you won't, because those women were experts. They knew how to keep stirring, keep cooking, and then they would take out their rocks when it was cooked.